Imagine stepping back into a late 19th century America, a nation still, healing from the Civil War, but right on the edge of becoming this global superpower.
A real turning point.
And then picture that whole journey defined by massive economic turmoil, really passionate political debates, and then, well, a devastating, just unthinkable loss at the very top.
Yeah, these are the currents, the deep undercurrents that really shaped the era of William McKinley. He's one of America's most pivotal presidents, but, it's surprising how often he gets kind of underrated.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking the life and the legacy of William McKinley, the 25th U.S. president. Like you said, he's a name we all know from history books, right?
Right.
But the full depth of his impact, how he really shaped the America we know today, that often gets a bit obscured. His presidency wasn't just another chapter. It was a fundamental shift.
What's truly compelling here, I think, is how McKinley's era acts as this profound transition point. It's almost like a hinge between the 19th and 20th centuries.
That's a great way to put it.
His decisions, both at home and abroad, they laid so much of the groundwork for the 20th century. They influenced everything from global power dynamics to national economic policy in ways we're honestly still grappling with, still talking about today. He really stood at a crossroads.
Exactly. So our mission with this deep dive is to guide you through McKinley's really remarkable journey. We'll start from his time as a determined Civil War soldier.
Right.
Through his distinguished career in Congress, then as governor, and all the way to the White House. We'll examine his transformative policies, his personal challenges, which were significant, and of course, the lasting, often pretty complex legacy he left behind.
Right.
And we're doing this by drawing from the rich sources provided to us.
And by immersing ourselves in McKinley's story, you're getting a powerful shortcut, really, to understanding this critical turning point in American history. You'll get those aha moments, about how the U.S. actually transformed into a global power, how these crucial domestic, economic, and social issues were shaped, and how those foundational decisions, well, they continue to echo in our modern debates. You'll walk away with a much clearer picture, I think, of an America right on the cusp of significant, really enduring change.
So let's set the scene then. Let's rewind the clock and take us back to the very beginning, to the formative years of William McKinley.
Okay.
William McKinley, Jr. He made his entrance into the world on January 29, 1843, in the small town of Niles, Ohio. He was, believe it or not, the seventh of 9 children.
Wow, big family.
Yeah, born to William McKinley, Sr. and Nancy Allison McKinley. The family had deep roots, tracing their ancestry back to English and Scots-Irish origins. They'd settled in western Pennsylvania way back in the 18th century.
And it's interesting, their immigrant ancestor, David McKinley, actually came from Dervock, which is in what's now Northern Ireland. And this family history, particularly their background as ironmakers, that wasn't just some side detail. It profoundly shaped William. The McKinleys, they moved their operations through various towns in Ohio, always kind of following the industry.
Oh, no.
Their household, pretty typical for Ohio's Western Reserve region at the time, was steeped in strong Whiggish sentiments, favoring Congress, modernization, protective tariffs, and they were staunchly abolitionists.
Driven by faith, largely.
Primarily driven by their deep Methodist faith, exactly. For William, this religious background wasn't just casual. He became an active member of the local Methodist church when he was 16, and he remained a lifelong, really devout Methodist. This early moral grounding, as our sources highlight, would indelibly connect to his later moral stances. It influenced his public life, his private life, particularly his strong views on social justice issues, like his public opposition to lynching when he was governor later on.
That's a crucial insight, isn't it? How those early influences weren't just background noise,
right?
But they really laid this deliberate groundwork for his future character, his leadership style.
Absolutely.
He got a decent education for the time. He attended Poland Seminary, then Allegheny College, even had a brief stint at Mount Union College. He was also an honorary member of Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity. But his early life wasn't all smooth sailing. After just a year at Allegheny, he fell ill, had to return home in 1860. And then, to make things tougher, his family's finances declined.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so he couldn't return to college. He had to take on work first as a postal clerk and then as a school teacher near Poland, Ohio.
So these early experiences, this blend of, intellectual pursuits, the comfort of family, but then the stark reality of financial hardship and needing to be self-reliant, coupled with that strong moral upbringing, it really prepared him, didn't it?
It must have.
For the profound challenges, the crucible, really, of the American Civil War, which erupted just a year later in 1861. That resilience, maybe even empathy honed in his youth, it would definitely serve him well.
Yeah, and what an extraordinary crucible it was.
Hmm.
When the Civil War broke out, like thousands of other eager young men across Ohio, McKinley, along with his cousin William McKinley Osborne, enlisted. They joined as privates in the Poland Guards in June 1861.
Right.
This unit eventually got consolidated into the 23rd Ohio Infantry.
And interestingly, the recruits, they were initially unhappy about not being allowed to elect their own officers. That was kind of a tradition, in earlier volunteer regiments. They wanted to choose their leaders.
Ah, okay.
But then Major Rutherford B. Hayes, who of course later became president himself, he stepped in. He skillfully convinced them to accept the government-issued supplies and the appointed officers. It showed this kind of nuanced leadership that really impressed the young McKinley.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and this interaction, it marked the beginning of a lasting association, a deep personal friendship between McKinley and Hayes. It would profoundly influence McKinley's life and career right up until Hayes' death in 1893.
That early leadership connection, forged right there in the raw beginnings of the war, that's absolutely fascinating. So the 23rd Ohio, they soon found themselves in Western Virginia fighting Confederate forces at Carnifex Ferry. And it wasn't long before McKinley, who'd already shown this kind of knack for organization and logistics, was assigned to the brigade quartermaster office. His efficiency was recognized pretty quickly, led to his promotion to commissary sergeant in April 1862.
And his dedication, and actually a sort of startling bravery, began to emerge really early on. He proved his mettle under fire. Later that September, the 23rd Ohio was called to reinforce the Army of Virginia, eventually joining the Army of the Potomac.
Right.
They were among the first Union units to engage the Confederates at the Battle of South Mountain, and then at the brutal, bloody Battle of Antietam. I mean, one of the deadliest single-day battles in American history.
Unbelievable.
And here, the story really takes a compelling turn. McKinley came under heavy enemy fire while personally bringing hot rations to his men right on the front lines. It was a crucial act, boosted morale, showed incredible courage.
Wow.
And this act of bravery and leadership, it earned him a commission as second lieutenant directly from Governor David Todd. That was a significant, really well-deserved early recognition of his service.
Just imagine the sheer chaos, the immense bravery needed not just to fight, but to lead and actually care for your men in the thick of a battle like Antietam.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of decisive action, rallying troops, maintaining composure under that kind of extreme duress. That was a trait that would undeniably serve him later in the political arena, wouldn't it?
You'd think so. His service continued with significant engagement. The Battle of Buffington Island, then Cloyd's Mountain, which McKinley himself described as, quote, as desperate as any witnessed during the war. He was promoted to captain after the Second Battle of Kernstown and got transferred to General Crick's staff. And again, he displayed remarkable leadership, personal courage, helped rally panicked Union troops during the Battle of Cedar Creek after this initial devastating Confederate advance. His horse was even shot out from under him at Berryville. I mean, that shows you how close he was to the action.
Incredible. And it wasn't just physical bravery, right? We also see these early signs of his developing political awareness, his commitment to democratic ideals.
That's right. During the war, he cast his very first presidential ballot for Abraham Lincoln. That's a powerful demonstration of his commitment to the Union cause and its vision for the nation.
Yeah.
Just before the war's end, he received his final promotion, a brevet commission, as major, a testament to his distinguished service. And then he made this principled decision, declined a place in the peacetime army, chose instead to return to Ohio civilian life, eager to rebuild his future.
But his commitment to the war's history didn't just end there.
No, remarkably, he even co-authored and published this formidable 12-volume work, The Official Roster of the Soldiers of the State of Ohio in the War of the Rebellion, 1861-1866. It's just a testament to his dedication to documenting the immense sacrifice of that era.
So after these harrowing years of war, McKinley, now a major, decides to pursue a career in law. He really dedicated himself, studied in an attorney's office in Poland, Ohio, then honed his skills further at Albany Law School in New York.
Right.
By March 1867, he was admitted to the bar in Warren, Ohio. That's a pretty swift transition, battlefield to courtroom.
Yeah.
Shortly after, he made the strategic move to Canton, Ohio, a growing manufacturing hub.
Good timing.
Yeah, and he quickly formed a successful partnership with an experienced local lawyer, George W. Belden. His legal practice flourished, and he made a really astute move, investing in Main Street buildings, securing this steady rental income that would serve him well for decades.
But what's truly striking here, I think, is how his personal life, even while he's finding this professional success and stability, was also marked by just profound, devastating tragedy.
Yeah, it really was.
In 1871, he married Ida Saxton, the daughter of a prominent, respected Canton family. She joined his Methodist church. Their life together seemed, promising.
Mm-hmm.
They welcomed two daughters, Catherine, born on Christmas Day, 1871, and then Ida, born in 1873. But this joy was just tragically short-lived. Their second daughter, Ida, died the very same year she was born.
Oh, heartbreaking.
And then just 2 years later, in 1875, Catherine died of typhoid fever. The cumulative effect of these losses was simply unbearable.
That's just an unimaginable amount of loss for any couple to endure, especially so close together. These profound personal sacrifices and challenges McKinley faced, they reveal a different, deeply human side of the public figure we usually focus on, don't they?
Absolutely. Ida never truly recovered from the deaths of their daughters. She descended into this deep depression, developed epilepsy, became increasingly fragile, really reliant on McKinley's constant presence and dedicated care. Our sources repeatedly emphasize his lifelong devotion as a husband and caregiver. He tended to her medical needs, her emotional needs, with just unwavering patience and tenderness for the rest of his life. This wasn't just duty, it was clearly a profound love and commitment that defined his private persona.
Indeed. And this intimate experience of personal suffering, this profound empathy, it undoubtedly shaped his character. It must have imbued him with a remarkable resilience, a deep understanding of human struggle, even as he's embarking on this demanding political career.
Yeah, it likely added layers of compassion to his public life that voters, often recognized and appreciated.
And those early political forays, they began surprisingly quickly, almost right after setting up his law practice.
Yeah.
In 1867, he gave speeches for his Army friend Rutherford B. Hayes's gubernatorial campaign. That was his first real venture into the political arena.
Right.
Then in 1869, he made this unexpected leap, successfully winning the election for prosecuting attorney of Stark County, an office, as you mentioned, traditionally held by Democrats.
Quite the upset.
Yeah. Though he narrowly lost his reelection bid in 1871, he was clearly making a name for himself, not just as a lawyer, but as this budding political force.
And this period really showcases his emerging political savvy, doesn't it? And a burgeoning empathy for working people, while also forging this key alliance that would define his future.
How so?
Well, a few years later, in 1876, McKinley took on this really high-profile pro bono case. He successfully defended a group of striking coal miners who'd been arrested for rioting after a clash with strikebreakers.
Okay.
He managed to secure the acquittal of all but one of the miners, a stunning legal victory. This case significantly raised his standing among laborers, a crucial part of the Stark County electorate, and showed his willingness to stand up for the common worker.
Oh, that makes sense.
And critically, it also introduced him to Mark Hanna, a Cleveland businessman who was actually one of the mine owners involved. Despite their initial positions, Hanna would, of course, become his strongest backer, a tireless fundraiser, a political powerhouse. He saw something in McKinley, a man of principle, great potential.
That case truly was a pivotal moment then, launching him onto a broader stage. With that strong standing among laborers, a growing reputation, he successfully campaigned for Ohio's 17th Congressional District in 1876.
Great.
He focused his campaign heavily on his unwavering support for a protective tariff that was a cornerstone of his economic philosophy, and he defeated his Democratic opponent by a solid 3,300 votes. Interestingly, though, this victory came at a personal cost. His congressional income was only half of what he earned as a successful lawyer.
And that commitment, despite the significant financial sacrifice, it profoundly underscores his deep belief in the protective tariff as this cornerstone of American prosperity. From his very first term, McKinley was a staunch advocate. He argued tariffs weren't just for revenue, they were fundamental, allowing American manufacturing to develop and flourish, giving domestic products a crucial price advantage over foreign competitors.
He had that famous quote, right?
Exactly. He famously articulated this vision, stating, "Under free trade, the trader is the master and the producer the slave. Protection is but the law of nature, the law of self-preservation, of self-development, of securing the highest and best destiny of the race of man."
Powerful words.
And he added, perhaps more pragmatically for the average voter, buy where you can pay the easiest. And that spot of earth is where labor wins its highest rewards. This philosophy was deeply rooted in the tangible prosperity he saw right there in Canton, a thriving manufacturing hub that greatly benefited from these protectionist policies.
That quote really encapsulates his economic vision, framing protectionism not just as policy, but almost as a moral imperative for national strength and worker well-being.
Absolutely.
His influence grew rapidly in the House, and after only 2 terms, he got appointed to the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. That's a testament to his rising stature, legislative skill. He also showed an early willingness to deviate from strict party lines on big issues. In 1878, for instance, he voted for the Bland-Allison Act, which mandated government purchases of silver for coinage. That went against President Hayes's veto, even his friend and House Republican leader James Garfield.
And that decision highlights his early willingness to break with party leaders on significant economic issues, a moment of independent thought that often gets overlooked. It also kind of foreshadows that intense later national debate over gold versus silver currency, an issue that would become absolutely central to his presidential campaigns and American politics at large. It showed a pragmatism, I think, that many found appealing, even if it ruffled some feathers within his own party.
Absolutely. By 1889, with Republicans back in the majority, McKinley's influence culminated in him becoming chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, a huge position. From this powerful spot, he guided the controversial McKinley Tariff of 1890 through Congress. This tariff imposed significant protective tariffs, though it was, somewhat altered and refined by special interests in the Senate before it finally passed.
And the McKinley Tariff immediately became a main theme of Democratic campaigns nationwide. It was used as this powerful political weapon against him, blamed for rising consumer prices.
Right.
This period also really shines a light on the bare-knuckle politics of the era. Democrats in the Ohio legislature repeatedly tried to gerrymander him out of office, basically redrawing district lines to dilute his support and consolidate their own power.
You tried that in 78 and 84.
Exactly, 1878 and again in 1884. Despite their efforts, he won both times. Hayes famously exulted, "Oh, the good luck of McKinley. He was gerrymandered out and then beat the gerrymander." It speaks volumes about his connection to the voters, doesn't it?
That's an amazing story of political resilience, grassroots popularity. But in 1890, the Democrats tried one last time with a particularly aggressive gerrymander. They put Stark County together with the heavily Democratic Holmes County.
Ouch.
Yeah. And to further twist the knife, Democratic peddlers went door to door, supposedly selling tinware, but actually blaming the McKinley Tariff for increased prices by offering their wares at inflated costs.
Wow, direct disinformation.
Totally. This targeted disinformation, combined with a broader national Democratic landslide that year, ultimately led to his defeat by only 300 votes. It's a compelling anecdote, really shows the fierce political battles of the time, and McKinley's tireless, though ultimately unsuccessful, efforts to connect with voters against this concerted campaign. But despite this setback, his reputation remained strong, and his political future was definitely far from over.
Not at all.
So even before he officially finished his term in Congress after that narrow defeat, William McKinley was already being widely urged to run for governor of Ohio.
The next logical step.
Right. He quietly but deftly arranged for his rival, Joseph B. Foraker, to nominate him at the 1891 State Republican Convention, a smart political move, showed his ability to unite different factions. He won by acclamation and then went on to secure the general election by about 20,000 votes, taking office in January 1892.
His governorship, even though it had relatively limited power compared to some other states, especially regarding legislative vetoes, it was still a major platform in national politics. Ohio was such a key swing state.
Crucial.
What's particularly notable here is how he steered this moderate course between capital and labor interests. It shows that appeal to working-class voters he'd cultivated earlier in his legal career, remember?
Yeah, the minor case.
Exactly. He procured legislation establishing an arbitration board for work disputes, pretty progressive for the time, and even pushed through a law fining employers for firing union workers. This demonstrated his continued balancing act, his broad appeal. He wasn't just a simple pro-business politician.
That's a strong record, a clear continuation of his established principles. But his second gubernatorial term brought this immense, unexpected personal financial strain. The Panic of 1893 hit the nation hard, plunged the economy into a deep depression.
A really rough time.
Yeah, and right in the middle of this, McKinley found himself called upon to repay over $100,000, an astronomical sum equivalent to about $3.5 million today.
Wow.
Turns out he'd guaranteed a friend's borrowings and was tragically unaware his friend had deceived him about new notes actually being renewals, making him liable for the whole amount.
Oh, no. That's devastating. And this financial crisis, this truly desperate moment, paradoxically, it highlights the deep loyalty he commanded, doesn't it? And ultimately, it solidified his ties with powerful figures who would be crucial for his future.
How so?
Well, McKinley, utterly in despair, initially considered resigning from office to go back to being an attorney and earn the money to pay off his debts. But his wealthy supporters, including the now very influential Mark Hanna and Chicago publisher H.H. Colsett, they swiftly stepped in.
They anonymously raised funds to pay off all his debts, returned all his property to him, and the public's sympathy for his plight actually increased his popularity immensely. He was easily reelected in November 1893 with the largest percentage of the vote for any Ohio governor since the Civil War. It was an extraordinary act of political and financial rescue.
What a dramatic, utterly pivotal rescue. So with his financial troubles behind him, McKinley, now backed by Hanna's considerable money, vast organizational skills, and just unwavering dedication, began quietly but strategically building support for a presidential bid through 1895 and early 1896.
Hanna's agents were incredibly effective. They worked tirelessly behind the scenes, got ahead of other contenders, secured delegates early, especially in the South and border states, which were historically tough to organize for Republicans. Thomas Platt, a New York political boss, a rival, even famously lamented, Hanna had the South practically solid before some of us awakened. It was just a master class in political groundwork.
This meticulous groundwork was absolutely crucial. McKinley, however, was resolute. He wanted the nomination without making any, shady deals about patronage or offices. It was a principled stance that Hanna fully supported and respected.
That's important.
Yeah, and this commitment to integrity, combined with Hanna's organizational prowess, it ensured he had an ample majority of delegates by the time the Republican National Convention began in St. Louis on June 16, 1896.
And he didn't even have to be there in person for the dramatic climax. McKinley followed events by telephone from Canton. Imagine that back then.
Amazing technology.
Right. He famously even heard part of 4 Acres' nominating speech over the line. When Ohio was called in the roll call, its votes tipped the balance, gave McKinley the nomination on the very first ballot. He celebrated just by hugging his wife and mother. A quiet moment of huge triumph.
Nice.
For his running mate, Garrett Hobart of New Jersey, was chosen a wealthy lawyer, businessman. Hanna biographer Herbert Crawley shrewdly noted, if he did little to strengthen the ticket, he did nothing to weaken it. Kind of a safe, competent choice.
It's a solid pick. So what does this all mean for his strategic genius? McKinley's evolution on the currency question, which was deeply divisive, right, was a masterclass in political navigation during this period of immense economic anxiety.
Oh, the gold versus silver thing was huge.
Exactly. Before the convention, he'd been a bit of a straddlebug on the issue, kind of favoring bimetallism backing currency with both gold and silver to inflate the money supply, but only through international agreement. But in the final days, after lots of consultations with influential politicians, businessmen, he made a decisive move. He decided the Republican platform should firmly endorse the gold standard.
A gold move.
Yeah, while still leaving the door open for international bimetallism. This firm stance, while it led to a walkout by some disgruntled Western delegates, it underscored Republican unity on a critical issue. And that was a stark contrast to the bitter public divisions erupting within the Democratic Party at the same time. This firm stance on the gold standard, coupled with promises of high protective tariffs, that would become central to his general election campaign, signaling this clear pro-stability economic vision.
Now, on to the 1896 election. This truly was a political earthquake, profound turning point in American history. The economic backdrop, well, it couldn't have been more dire. This deep, lingering depression just naturally strengthened fervent calls for free silver.
Right. The policy advocated by many farmers, debtors, who believed it would inflate the currency, ease their economic burdens.
Exactly. And the Democratic Party itself was bitterly divided over this very issue. The charismatic William Jennings Bryan, representing the Silverites, took fiery control of their convention after his electrifying Cross of Gold speech.
Ah, the famous speech.
Yeah, where he famously declared Americans should not be crucified on a cross of gold, passionately arguing for the free coinage of silver to help farmers and debtors.
And that set the stage for one of the most unique and strategically brilliant campaigns in American history. McKinley decided to break tradition, stay home in Canton for what became known as the Front Porch Campaign.
Why did you do that?
He believed Bryan was just a far better orator, a genuine political rock star of his time. He famously said, "I might just as well set up a trapeze on my front lawn and compete with some professional athlete as go out speaking against Bryan. I have to think when I speak."
Huh. That's quite self-aware.
It was. And a genius strategy for the time. It was a way to connect directly with a mass electorate without the risks of, extemporaneous speaking and avoiding the grueling physical toll of constant travel.
It truly was an innovative and highly effective approach. Daily, delegations from all over the country, farmers, veterans, factory workers, they'd arrive by special trains, often subsidized with low excursion rates. They'd march right to McKinley's front porch in Canton. There, he would deliver these carefully scripted speeches, meticulously tailored to the delegation's specific interests, their concerns. Even the spokesman's remarks for the delegations were pre-approved by his campaign to avoid any embarrassing missteps or offhand comments. It was controlled, yes, but also profoundly personal in a way.
And in stark contrast to McKinley's static yet powerful front porch, Bryan embarked on this unprecedented whirlwind, whistle-stop political tour by train. Thousands of miles, hundreds of speeches, relying on his unparalleled eloquence and youthful energy, directly addressing vast crowds.
Meanwhile, Mark Hanna, the genius behind McKinley's campaign.
Right. Hanna was a fundraising marvel. He secured an astonishing $3.5 million from anxious bankers and industrialists who deeply feared Bryan's inflationary-free silver program. This immense sum funded an army of speakers, countless local Republican clubs, and the production of over 200 million pamphlets advocating the Republican position on sound money and protective tariffs.
200 million pamphlets.
Incredible, isn't it? Bryan's campaign, by comparison, had maybe $500,000 at most, a truly staggering disparity.
The propaganda from both sides was fierce, but Hanna's machine was relentless. Homer Davenport's vicious cartoons, published prominently in William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal, they were particularly memorable. They portrayed Hanna as this ruthless plutocrat trampling on labor, and McKinley as his easily controlled creature or puppet.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how those powerful, unflattering depictions, though often just caricatures, they still kind of color perceptions of Hanna and McKinley today, right? Even though our sources indicate a much more complex, mutually respectful relationship.
Absolutely. What's also remarkable, and maybe often overlooked in today's soundbite culture, is the sheer level of voter engagement during this period. This wasn't just about catchy slogans or brief speeches. It was a deeply intellectual campaign for the average voter.
People obviously read the pamphlets.
They did. People widely studied and debated the millions of pamphlets distributed, seeking economic and political truth. These meticulously prepared pamphlets were devoured by the public, becoming essential guides to economic thought and political action. It reflects a highly informed and engaged electorate, which is quite something.
Initially, McKinley's campaign expected monetary issues to fade as the primary concern, but silver and gold dominated the campaign's early stages. However, as public support for free silver eventually receded, partly due to returning prosperity, Republicans shrewdly pivoted back to their other core issue, emphasizing the protective tariff as the key to economic recovery and stability.
Smart move. And the results.
Decisive. McKinley won the entire Northeast and Midwest, secured 51% of the popular vote, and a large electoral college majority. Bryan, having focused almost exclusively on silver, critically failed to appeal to urban workers. Denver, Colorado was the only city outside the South with more than 100,000 people that he carried. This election truly marked a seismic shift in American politics. It reshaped the electoral map for generations. Historians universally regard 1896 as a realigning election, meaning a fundamental, lasting shift in voter allegiances and party platforms, leading to a long period of dominance for one party.
The fourth party system.
Exactly. It established Republican dominance in what became known as the fourth party system, which lasted right up until 1932. McKinley's pro-business, industrial, gold standard, protective tariff vision triumphed definitively. It effectively ended the post-Civil War political stalemate and laid the economic and political foundation for America's rise as a global power.
So, with this decisive victory, this mandate for his policies, William McKinley was sworn in as president on March 4, 1897. His inaugural address carefully emphasized tariff reform and, with a nod to the recent campaign, stated that the currency issue would follow. Importantly, he also cautiously warned against foreign interventions. He said, "We want no wars of conquest. We must avoid the temptation of territorial aggression."
A statement that, in retrospect, takes on a fascinating irony given what was just around the corner, doesn't it?
It really does. And that irony is profound. Some of his early cabinet appointments were quite controversial, reflecting the sort of political maneuvering and debt repayment of the era. His choice for Secretary of State John Sherman was an experienced statesman, but at 73, his abilities were rapidly declining due to old age.
Right.
McKinley moved Sherman into that role primarily to create a Senate vacancy, allowing Mark Hanna to be appointed to the Senate. It was a classic political calculation to secure his key backer a powerful seat, though it certainly raised some eyebrows.
Yeah, that caused some talk. Another perhaps ill-advised appointment was Russell A. Alger as Secretary of War. While competent in peacetime, he unfortunately proved inadequate once the Spanish-American War dramatically erupted.
And then there's the story of Theodore Roosevelt, who would become such a central figure himself. McKinley was initially quite reluctant to appoint him as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He famously told one booster, "I want peace, and I am told that your friend Theodore is always getting into rows with everybody."
Huh. Talk about a moment of presidential foresight, considering Roosevelt's later big stick diplomacy. But he made the appointment anyway.
Right. Vice President Garrett Hobart, though he didn't attend cabinet meetings, proved to be a valuable, informal advisor and a close friend. His family frequently visited the McKinleys, offered much-needed personal support, and McKinley's personal secretary, George B. Cortelyou, became this indispensable combination of press secretary and chief of staff, renowned for his efficiency.
Economically, McKinley moved quickly to deliver on his campaign promises, solidifying that protectionist and sound money framework he championed. Less than 5 months into his presidency, he signed the Dingley Tariff of 1897. It significantly raised tariff rates on wool, sugar, luxury goods, continuing his vision for American industry.
And the currency issue.
Internationally, efforts for bimetallism, like talks with Britain to reopen mints in India to silver coinage, they ultimately failed. There was strong opposition from the Indian administration, British officials. With that, McKinley firmly embraced the gold standard as the path forward.
So, as prosperity gradually returned to the U.S., and critically, these new gold discoveries in the Yukon and Australia increased the global monetary supply.
Right, that eased the pressure.
The intense political agitation for free silver began to ease. McKinley then urged Congress to pass the Gold Standard Act of 1900. He famously signed it into law on March 14, 1900, using a symbolic gold pen.
There you have it. McKinley really delivering on his core campaign promises, definitively solidifying the economic framework of the gold standard that would underpin the American economy for the progressive era and beyond.
However, when we examine McKinley's record on civil rights, it presents a far more complex and, for many, a deeply disappointing picture, doesn't it?
It really does. Black Americans initially held high hopes for progress under his administration. Given his past public stance against lynching as governor and their crucial support for him in 1896.
Right.
Yet McKinley's overarching priority was largely ending sectionalism, healing that North-South divide, which, tragically, often came at the expense of addressing racial injustice. He made very few high-level appointments for Black individuals, signaling a retreat from Reconstruction-era efforts.
And more disturbingly,
he issued no public condemnation when Black postmasters, who were federal officials, were violently assaulted in Hogansville, Georgia in 1897 or in Lake City, South Carolina in 1898. These weren't isolated incidents, they were part of a broader pattern of racial intimidation.
And during the horrific Wilmington insurrection of 1898 in North Carolina, where white supremacists violently overthrew the legitimately elected biracial fusion government, McKinley's administration again refused to intervene.
They just stood by.
Pretty much. Black leaders explicitly requested federal marshals or troops to protect Black citizens from the mobs and restore order, but McKinley denied these appeals. He ignored desperate pleas for help to recover from the widespread destruction of the predominantly Black neighborhood of Brooklyn. This inaction sent a chilling message, effectively validating Jim Crow violence and white supremacist power in the South.
This raises a profoundly important and challenging question for historians, doesn't it? While admired for his economic policies, wartime leadership, McKinley's record on civil rights shows this missed opportunity to transcend the deeply entrenched racial biases of his day. It caused immense, lasting disappointment among Black leaders and citizens.
Yeah.
His subsequent tour of the South, intended to promote national reconciliation, further alienated many Black Americans. While he visited the Tuskegee Institute, a symbol of Black progress, he also visited numerous Confederate memorials, a gesture seen by many as prioritizing white Southern sentiment over Black civil rights. As historian Clarence A. Bacote noted, despite some initial hope, Black people ultimately felt largely disappointed by his inaction. It's a significant stain on his legacy.
Moving now to foreign policy, this is where McKinley's presidency truly marked an undeniable pivotal shift for the United States, irrevocably launching it onto the global stage as this burgeoning power.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Cuban crisis, with decades of brutal Cuban rebellion against Spanish colonial rule and growing American public outrage over horrific Spanish reprisals, was a brewing storm he just couldn't ignore. McKinley initially favored peaceful negotiation for Cuban independence, or at the very least substantial autonomy.
He genuinely pursued a path of arbitrationism, seeking peaceful resolution through third-party intervention and humanitarianism, driven by concern for the Cuban people. Spain did make some significant concessions in January 1898, but renewed riots in Havana prompted McKinley to deploy the USS Maine to protect American interests and citizens.
And then the explosion.
Then, on February 15, 1898, the Maine tragically exploded and sank in Havana Harbor, killing 266 American sailors. While an official inquiry ruled it was blown up by an underwater mine, though historians still debate the precise cause, public opinion in the U.S. was inflamed, demanding retribution, seeing Spain as having lost all control.
Huge pressure for war.
Immense public and congressional pressure. Yet McKinley continued to negotiate, even offering to buy Cuba. But when Spain refused his final proposals for Cuban independence, he reluctantly turned the matter over to Congress. Congress declared war on April 20th, 1898, famously including the Teller Amendment, which disavowed any American intention to annex Cuba. Some historians meticulously argue McKinley's actions were driven more by a genuine commitment to arbitration and humanitarianism, rather than simply succumbing to jingoistic external pressure. It showcases his complex, often reluctant decision-making process.
The Spanish-American War, famously described by John Hay as a splendid little war, proved to be a swift and remarkably decisive victory for the U.S. It significantly, dramatically expanded its global reach. McKinley exercised an unprecedented level of control over military and naval movements, thanks to new technologies like the telegraph and telephone. He could direct strategy right from the White House.
Amazing.
Commodore George Dewey's swift, overwhelming victory at the Battle of Manila Bay in the Philippines, just days after the war began, immediately expanded the war's scope far beyond the Caribbean. McKinley quickly grasped the strategic implications and decisively decided that Spain would be required to surrender the entire archipelago.
Wow, a big decision. On the Caribbean front, Major General William Rufus Shafter's forces invaded Cuba, leading to key engagements like the famous Battle of San Juan Hill and the subsequent destruction of Spain's Caribbean squadron. Santiago quickly surrendered, effectively placing Cuba under American control. Simultaneously, the invasion of Puerto Rico met with little resistance.
And this rapid deployment highlighted a problem, didn't it?
It did. This rapid deployment and success highlighted a critical logistical challenge for the growing American Navy: the difficulty of maintaining a two-ocean presence. This, in turn, made a canal across Central America more essential than ever, directly setting the stage for the construction of the Panama Canal under Theodore Roosevelt, a project born directly from the strategic lessons of McKinley's War.
So the Treaty of Paris, signed in December 1898, formally solidified the peace and redrew the global map. Spain relinquished all claims to Cuba and critically ceded Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the U.S. for a payment of $20 million.
Right. McKinley and Vice President Hobart lobbied tirelessly, ultimately successfully, for Senate approval, which passed by a narrow margin. This monumental acquisition marked a profound and controversial expansion of American territory and influence, often seen by historians as the definitive beginning of an American empire.
This expansion indeed raises an incredibly important, enduring question for American identity and foreign policy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What were the long-term implications of these annexations?
Immediately, a fierce pro-independence rebellion erupted in the Philippines, leading to a brutal, costly war that the U.S. eventually suppressed. This sparked a heated anti-imperialist movement right here at home, questioning the democratic implications of ruling distant peoples without their consent.
Yeah.
Beyond Philippines, these annexations irrevocably cemented America's position as a global power. It forced the U.S. to develop new administrative structures for governing overseas territories and directly influenced its subsequent engagement in Asia and Latin America.
And alongside these dramatic gains, McKinley also pursued the annexation of the independent Republic of Hawaii in 1898. He lobbied Congress intensely, warning of potential royalist counter-revolution or even a Japanese takeover.
Right. And this was achieved via a joint resolution, at the Newlands Resolution, rather than a treaty, shrewdly bypassing the two-thirds Senate vote required for a treaty. McKinley reportedly told his secretary, Cortelyou, "We need Hawaii just as much and a good deal more than we did California. It is manifest destiny," invoking that powerful expansionist American ideology.
Wow.
His administration also acquired American Samoa through the Tripartite Convention, partitioning the Samoan Islands with the UK and German Empire during a period known as the Great Rapprochement with Britain.
And his global influence didn't stop with just grabbing territory, did it?
Not at all. McKinley also championed an open-door policy of free trade and territorial integrity for China. He sought to prevent its partition by European powers and secure American commercial interests there.
And the Boxer Rebellion.
During the brutal Boxer Rebellion in 1900, when foreign legations in Peking were besieged, their occupants threatened, he took decisive action. McKinley ordered 5,000 U.S. troops, the China Relief Expedition, to join an international force and relieve the siege. This intervention set a crucial precedent for future presidential military action without explicit legislative consultation, significantly expanding executive power in foreign affairs. It's undeniably clear that under William McKinley, the U.S. was truly stepping onto the world stage, not just as a player, but as an assertive, increasingly dominant force.
McKinley's immense popularity, coupled with the nation's returned prosperity and the triumphant conclusion of the Spanish-American War, virtually assured his renomination for the 1900 election. The main question swirling around the Republican convention wasn't if McKinley would run, but rather who would be his running mate. Vice President Hobart had tragically died in late 1899.
Right, so they needed a new VP. McKinley considered several prominent figures, including his capable Secretary of War, Elihu Root.
But the undeniable, most popular choice was
Theodore Roosevelt, of course. As the reformist governor of New York, a celebrated war hero from Cuba with his Rough Riders, Roosevelt was this rising political star with immense public appeal.
But not everyone was thrilled.
No. Despite Mark Hanna's strong opposition, he considered Roosevelt overly impulsive, a potential threat to the party's conservative wing, and New York political boss Thomas C. Platt's efforts to sideline Roosevelt by pushing him into the seemingly ceremonial VP role. The convention delegates coalesced overwhelmingly around Roosevelt.
So the people chose TR.
Pretty much. McKinley was unanimously renominated, a testament to his strength, and Roosevelt was nominated for vice president on the first ballot, even with Hanna's very reluctant acquiescence. It was a fascinating display of grassroots power overriding the party bosses.
The 1900 election saw a familiar contest, a rematch against William Jennings Bryan. But the campaign issues had shifted significantly, hadn't they?
They had. Republicans focused relentlessly on the recent wartime victory, which had secured America's global standing, and the undeniable domestic prosperity that McKinley's gold standard and tariff policies had brought. Their slogan, 4 more years of a full dinner pail, really resonated.
Yetchy.
Democrats, on the other hand, attacked the growing power of trusts, these large corporations and monopolies and corporate power, portraying McKinley as a servant of big business interests.
And the campaign styles.
As in '96, Bryan embarked on another exhausting nationwide whistle-stop tour, crisscrossing the country delivering his impassioned speeches. McKinley, by contrast, largely stayed home, maintaining his front porch style, making only one speech to formally accept his nomination. Theodore Roosevelt, however, became the primary Republican speaker, campaigning tirelessly across the country with his characteristic vigor and charisma.
Could Bryan's approach work this time?
Bryan's campaigning this time around, though energetic, it just failed to ignite the same fervor, the same widespread public enthusiasm it had garnered in 1896. The nation was feeling prosperous, victorious, and the appeal of his free silver platform had really waned.
So McKinley was confident.
Well-founded confidence. On November 6, 1900, he won a truly landslide victory, the largest for any Republican since 1872. He even made inroads into Bryan's traditional strongholds, carried Bryan's home state of Nebraska. This resounding victory solidified the Republican Party's dominance, affirmed McKinley's own political strength, and firmly established that fourth-party system that would define American politics for the next 3 decades.
Tragically, this strong second term, which promised so much, was cut short by an act of just senseless violence. Soon after his inauguration in March 1901, William and Ida McKinley embarked on a planned 6-week national tour. It was a celebratory journey, included plans to visit the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York.
Right, but Ida's recurring health issues, her fragile condition, forced a postponement of the Buffalo visit until September.
And security was a concern.
It was. Personal Secretary George B. Cortelyou, keenly aware of the rising tide of anarchism and recent assassinations of leaders in Europe, was deeply concerned about McKinley's security. He tried twice to remove a large public reception from the itinerary at the exposition, sensing the danger of a crowded, open event.
But McKinley refused.
He did. McKinley genuinely enjoyed meeting the public, felt it was his duty. He refused to back down, believing that direct connection with the people was paramount.
So on September 6, 1901, at the Temple of Music on the Exposition grounds, as McKinley greeted the public, Leon Czolgosz, an anarchist who believed the president was an oppressor, approached him in the receiving line and shot McKinley twice in the abdomen at close range.
Just awful. And in the immediate, chaotic aftermath, even as he lay wounded, McKinley displayed this extraordinary compassion. He urged his aides to break the devastating news gently to Ida, who was known for her frail health. And remarkably, he told them to call off the mob that had already attacked Czolgosz, potentially saving his assassin's life from immediate vengeance.
Incredible presence of mind. But the medical situation.
Yeah, here's where the medical practices of the time and the tragic absence of modern infection control played such a critical role in his fate. Doctors were unable to locate the second bullet, which had penetrated deep into his abdomen.
And they had an X-ray machine nearby.
Agonizingly, yes. Despite a primitive X-ray machine being present right there on the exposition grounds, it was not used, probably due to a lack of understanding of its practical application or maybe the perceived danger of using it.
Oh, what could have been?
Exactly. Initial optimistic bulletins, perhaps born of wishful thinking, led cabinet members and Vice President Roosevelt to disperse, believing he would recover. But on September 13, McKinley's condition rapidly deteriorated. Unbeknownst to the doctors, gangrene, this deadly bacterial infection, was growing on the walls of his stomach, slowly, irreversibly poisoning his blood.
So by the evening,
McKinley, with a somber clarity, knew he was dying. He famously said, "It is useless, gentlemen. I think we ought to have prayer." He comforted his grieving wife. We're all going. God's will be done, not ours," and found solace in singing part of his favorite hymn, "Nearer, my God, to thee."
William McKinley died at 2:15 a.m. on September 14, 1901. Theodore Roosevelt, having rushed back to Buffalo from the Adirondacks, took the oath of office later that day, ushering in a new, much more dynamic era.
And
Czolgosz was swiftly tried, found guilty, and executed by electric chair on October 29, 1901, just over a month after the assassination.
The nation was plunged into this profound wave of genuine grief and mourning. His casket lay in state in the Capitol, a symbol of national sorrow, then was transported by train to Canton, Ohio, with countless Americans lining the tracks. Approximately 100,000 people viewed his open casket in Washington and an equal number in Canton, a testament to his immense popularity.
He was ultimately interred in the Grand McKinley National Memorial in Canton. And Ida McKinley, despite expectations she would quickly follow him, she showed remarkable resilience. She survived her husband, living until 1907, maintaining a shrine in her house, frequently visiting his vault, remaining devoted until her own passing.
Memorials to McKinley are numerous, reflecting his historical importance. There are prominent monuments in Columbus and his birthplace of Niles, many schools named in his honor. However, his legacy isn't without its controversies, its shifting interpretations, right?
Definitely. The naming of Denali in Alaska as Mount McKinley in 1896, its subsequent renaming back to Denali by the Obama administration in 2015, followed by President Trump's executive order to restore the McKinley name in 2025, as of our current date.
Yeah, that whole debate.
It highlights the fluid cultural and historical lenses through which we view figures like McKinley. This ongoing debate about a mountain's name underscores deeper questions about historical recognition, indigenous rights, and national identity.
Historically, McKinley died the most beloved president in history, a genuinely popular figure. But Theodore Roosevelt quickly captured public attention with his vibrant personality, his progressive agenda, and by 1920, McKinley's administration was often deemed, maybe unfairly, a mediocre prelude to Roosevelt's vigor.
But that view changed.
Yeah. More favorable evaluations began to emerge in the 1950s, though he generally ranks kind of in the middle of presidents in historical surveys. Some historians argue he followed public opinion more than he led it, which in some evaluations can affect his ranking as a truly transformative leader.
Interesting point.
Indeed. But there's broad agreement among historians that his election was a truly pivotal transition between political eras, from the turbulent third to the stable fourth-party systems. It fundamentally reshaped American politics. Karl Rove, a prominent political strategist, even exalted McKinley as a model for successful political realignment.
And his administration fostered future leaders.
Absolutely. His administration cultivated and fostered individuals who would go on to dominate the Republican Party for a quarter century after his death. People like Cordell Hull, Charles Dawes, who later became vice president, William Ardee, who served on the Supreme Court, and William Howard Taft, who later became president.
Right.
And as a direct, tragic consequence of his assassination, the U.S. Secret Service's presidential protection duties were initiated, irrevocably changing how American presidents are safeguarded.
His territorial expansion, undeniably a defining feature of his presidency, remains a controversial aspect of his legacy, often seen as the beginning of an American empire. The U.S. still retains most of the territories taken under McKinley, with the notable exception of the Philippines, which finally gained independence in 1946 after a complex, often difficult period under American rule.
Right. And historians continue to debate his motivations for this expansion. Was it driven by humanitarian concerns, economic interests, a belief in manifest destiny? And critically, what were the profound implications of this expansion for America's identity, its role in the world, and for the peoples in those annexed territories?
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, McKinley's presidency isn't just some chapter in history. It's really a foundational text for understanding America's modern economic, political, and global identity. He presided over an administration characterized by conservative policies and foreign policy, a complex and often inaction-driven approach to civil rights, and a decidedly laissez-faire approach to government intervention in the economy.
He wasn't passive, though.
No, not at all. He wasn't a passive figure. He was an active, informed participant whose decisions shaped future policies, public attitudes, the very trajectory of the nation. His choices resonate even today in debates about national power, interventionism versus isolationism, and the balance between economic growth and social justice.
So what does this deep dive into William McKinley mean for us today? We've explored a president caught between an old, post-Civil War America and a rapidly burgeoning global power. He navigated immense economic shifts and profound personal tragedies with this kind of quiet dignity. He was a man who, despite a humble start and immense personal loss, led the nation through a period of dramatic expansion and economic transformation, leaving an indelible mark.
And this raises an important question, I think, that echoes through time. In an age of rapid global change, shifting moral landscapes, how much do we truly understand the long-term, the ripple effect consequences of our leaders' decisions, especially when those decisions don't just shape a single nation, but influence an entire century?
That's a powerful thought.
Think about how his decisions on tariffs continue to shape global trade discussions, or how the acquisition of overseas territories still impacts geopolitical alliances and debates about national sovereignty even now. What might America look like today if he had lived to serve his full second term, maybe guiding the nation through the initial stages of the Progressive Era, or if he had chosen a different, less expansionist path back in 1898?
Yeah.
His story compels us, I think, to consider the powerful, often unseen echoes of the past right here in our present reality.